What if the Roman legions you've seen in movies, the endless wall of red tunics, shining plate armor, and perfect rectangular shields, were mostly a Hollywood illusion? What if real legionaries wore off-white wool instead of bright crimson, sandals with socks instead of armored boots, and marched in a mix of chainmail, scales, and plates? Hardly the identical war machine we imagine. Could this messy, improvised reality actually explain how Rome built an empire that lasted for centuries? Let's find out. When Americans picture a legionary, we see a single, timeless uniform. Bright red tunic, shimmering plate armor, big rectangular shield. That image was glued in place by mid-20th century peplum films. Ben-Hur, Cleopatra, every wide shot stuffed with extras and matching costumes. It looks great. It's just not how 1,000 years of history works. Myth versus reality? Myth. Rome kept one standard look from the Republic through the Empire. Reality. Equipment shifted every 10 to 20 years. Major redesigns hit every 100 to 200. Weather, money, and enemies kept pushing change. A soldier on Hadrian's Wall in damp, windy northern Britain did not dress like a soldier in sunny Hispania unless he wanted frostbite as a souvenir. Think of it like comparing a modern U.S. Marine in Norway to a Marine training in Hawaii. Same branch, very different layers. The Roman system did that constantly across 3 continents with pre-industrial logistics. The result on any given frontier was not a tidy, uniform wall. It was a practical mosaic. Gear that worked right there, right then. And about those famous red tunics, high-quality red dyes were expensive. Most rank and file wore undyed wool, a natural off-white, sometimes with red clavi, thin vertical stripes, as status markers. The bright Valentine's Day red? Mostly Hollywood. Did red exist? Sure. Was it universal? Not for common soldiers' pay. Humor beat. If you're imagining a century of Romans all in flawless crimson, picture an NFL team that never changes jerseys for 1,000 seasons. Even the Cleveland Browns rework the stripes sometimes. Legion versus today's military, at a glance, standardization. Today's armies chase strict global standards. Rome standardized where it could, but adapted locally, fast. Procurement. We use centralized contracts and just-in-time logistics. Rome leaned on regional workshops, captured stockpiles, and a lot of on-the-spot repairs. Look on the line. We expect matching kits. They expected function first, match later. Start with the tunic. Most legionaries wore wool, not because Rome lacks style, but because wool breathes, insulates, and survives abuse. Linen spread later. Silk existed, but if you were a common soldier wearing silk, you were either on parade or in trouble. Color? The everyday palette skewed undyed or lightly tinted with red clavi for rank or unit. The gold-edged velvet soft tunic in pop culture looks amazing, like an Oscars outfit, just not for marching 20 miles with 50 pounds of gear. Around the neck sat the focale, a scarf that saved your skin from chafing metal. Over everything, the pennula, a hooded cloak. In the field, soldiers used it as a sleeping bag. It wasn't glamorous, but it turned rain and wind from enemies into mild inconveniences. Feet? Meet the caligae, thick-soled sandals studded with iron hobnails. Built for 500 to 1,000 kilometers of marching, they grip mud, shed water, and dry fast. But what about winter? Socks. Yes, socks. The Vindolanda tablets from northern Britain literally list shipments of socks, underwear, sandals. Archaeology even found a statue in South London wearing, brace yourself, sandals with socks. The Romans may have invented the world's least Instagram-friendly combo, and they didn't care because warm toes win campaigns. And trousers? In warm Italy, Romans mocked them as barbarian. On freezing frontiers, mockery stopped at the first snow. Soldiers wore wool leg coverings because pride doesn't keep you alive at 11 degrees Celsius in sleet. Legion versus today's military. Fabrics. Modern troops wear moisture-wicking synthetics. Legionaries trusted wool and linen, plus smart layering. Cold weather gear. We issue thermal boots. They ran caligy plus socks, plus trousers, plus cloaks. Uniform policy. We enforce strict uniform codes. Rome's code was pragmatism. If it keeps you marching, it's regulation enough. Humor beat. Fashion police would have arrested half the frontier for sandals with socks. Campaign commanders gave them medals instead. 3 big families of armor appear on Roman lines. Lorica hamata, male, Lorica segmentata, plates, and Lorica squamata, scales. Not in a neat sequence, but together, often side by side. Hamata, male, rings linked into a flexible shirt, durable, repairable. Heavier, often 12 to 16 kilograms, but one broken patch doesn't doom the whole set. Fieldsmiths can replace sections. Segmentata, plates, curved iron plates on a leather base, lighter, around 8 to 10 kilograms, and quick to size. Great for issue to new recruits. Problem, it demands specialized workshops. If a plate cracks in the wrong way, repairs get ugly fast. Squamata, scales. Overlapping scales on a backing. Good protection, decent flexibility, common by the late 2nd century. On any given day, a legion might field all 3. You could stand in formation and see mail at your elbow, plates at your shoulder, scales 2 men down. Sometimes you saw hybrids, male torsos with plate shoulder caps. In the eastern provinces, long rides and hot campaigns made mail a keeper. In the west, segmentata had its big moment in the 2nd century, then faded by 3rd to 4th as costs, tactics, and supply lines shifted. Maintenance mindset. Rome was not a boutique armor brand, it was a continent-sized repair shop. Gear was maintained to fight, not to match. If you want a modern analogy, think modular plate carriers and mix and match pouches in today's forces, except with anvils, not CNC machines. Legion versus today's military, body armor. We use ballistic plates against bullets and shrapnel. Romans optimized against arrows, spears, swords, and fatigue. Supply. We swapped plates through centralized depots. They swapped rings, scales, straps at the nearest fort. Uniformity. We prized clean, identical silhouettes. They prized uptime. Can you march tomorrow? Good. Wear it. Humor beat. If a quartermaster tried to make every legionary match perfectly, he'd be reassigned to the wine inventory by lunchtime. Early helmets like the Montefortino came from Celtic designs. Bronze bowls with simple fittings. Under the Principate, imperial helmets added cheek guards and neck flares. Centurions wore transverse crests to stand out. By the 3rd to 4th centuries, helmets gained composite domes, hinged cheek pieces, sometimes nasal guards. Less pretty than the movie props. Far more practical. Shields tell an even bigger story. The iconic scutum started elongated oval, became rectangular and semi-cylindrical by the 1st century BCE. Roughly 75 by 120 centimeters, 8 to 10 kilograms, laminated wood with fabric and calfskin facing, as described by Polybius. By the 3rd century CE, scuta fade. Oval or round shields return, often convex or flat. Changing shield equals changing tactics. Formation density, angles of coverage, how you absorb arrows, how you push. Modern comparison, think riot police. Swap the Roman shield line for a wall of ballistic shields and batons, and you can feel how shape dictates movement. Testudo, the tortoise, wasn't a daily commute stance. It was a situational tool. Romans used what worked, then switched when the situation changed. Legion versus today's military. Helmet tech. We chase blast and ballistic ratings. They chase coverage, airflow, visibility, and horseback comfort. Shield doctrine. We rarely fight with shields outside specialized units. Romans used shields as weapons, armor, and architecture. Mobile walls with human hearts. Formation logic. We rely on fire and maneuver. They relied on mass, angles, and cohesion. Humor beat. Testudo looks cool until you realize it's a slow-moving coffee table full of men who really hope no one trips. The Roman short sword, the gladius, shines in tight formations. It's a thrusting weapon. Types like Hispaniensis, Mainz, Fulham, Pompeii speak to tweaks in length and balance. But by the 3rd century, the longer spatha wins out, first with cavalry, then infantry, because looser formations and new enemies demand reach and cutting power. The Pugio dagger, double-edged, is both backup weapon and camp tool. It dices rations, opens crates, and, if things go sideways, finds gaps in armor. Meanwhile, the pilum, a heavy javelin, exists to wreck shields and break lines. Some variants deform on impact, making the enemy ditch his own protection. Later, the spiculum keeps that piercing punch with a different build. None of it works without training. Romans drilled throws the way we drill magazine changes. But a legion was more than weapons. It was a working town on the move. Ditch digging, palisade raising, road building, bridge throwing. Every night, a fortified camp. Every day, a task list. We think of the legionary as a fighter first. The empire often treated him as a combat engineer who could also fight very well. Modern comparison. Our infantry rely on rifles, grenades, and support fires. Romans built fights around shields plus discipline, plus shock, with javelins as the prelude. We call in combat engineers. They were their own engineers. We measure logistics in pallets and fuel. They measured in grain, nails, mules, and miles of ditch. Humor beat. If your image of Rome is nonstop swordplay, remember, somebody dug the latrines. That somebody probably threw a pilum better than you, then went back to measuring trench width. Legion versus today's military. Primary effects. We project force at range. They overwhelmed up close after carefully setting the table. Specialties. We split roles. They cross-trained hard. Sustainment. We bring the warehouse. They built the warehouse every evening, out of stakes and sweat. At the end of the day, the Roman legionary wasn't defined by a color swatch or a specific helmet crest. He was defined by a system: pay, discipline, hard drill, citizenship incentives, brutal punishments, yes, but also powerful rewards. Commanders who carried their men through decades of campaigning. A bureaucracy that could move metal, grain, and replacements over mountains, deserts, and seas without trucks, radios, or GPS. That system was flexible enough to change weapons, armors, shields, and tactics again and again. That's why the reality, more mixed, more improvised, more human, is actually more impressive than the myth. It's easy to look perfect if you never change. The legionary kept winning while changing constantly. Legion versus today's military. Final take. Doctrine. We write manuals and iterate. They learn by campaign, then rebuilt the template. Leadership. We cultivate an NCO backbone. They relied on centurions. Tough, experienced, relentless. Identity. We wear patches and tabs. They wore honor on the belt, the cingulum, the scars on their shins, and the weight of roads they built behind them. So if we redraw the uniform in our head, less studio red, more wool and weather, less perfect symmetry, more field repairs. We also redraw Roman warfare, not a museum of matching mannequins, a living machine that kept itself running in mud, heat, and snow. Humor beat, closing smile. Hollywood gave us the picture-perfect legionary. Archaeology gave us the guy in sandals with socks who still conquered half of Europe. If you have to pick one for your team, choose the socks.